Okay.
Okay, yeah, thanks a bunch, Ryan. Hi, guys. I'm Josh Palmieri. I'm the project manager for the ADUs in Denver. I think we're still going to wait maybe a couple more minutes as people trickle in. So let's just give everybody a quick breather. But in the meantime, I suppose we can introduce Ryan Golton from CBI. She will be our facilitator for this project. CBI is the Consensus Building Institute. So Ryan, take it away if you would like to open it up.
Sure. I think just a couple of notes while we wait for the final people to arrive. So most of you on the committee have already heard me say this, but if you just joined, if you could include in your Zoom name tag your organization, if it's relevant, and or neighborhood, and you do that by just going to where it says participants at the bottom of your screen, finding your name, and there's a drop-down menu, and you can say rename. So it'd be great to know who's who on the screen. And I think, Josh, do you want to sort of, I guess in 1 minute, we'll just formally start the meeting and we'll do introductions and we'll tell you what we're doing tonight. So maybe we'll give folks like 30 more seconds.
I'm excited. Looks like we're doing good in terms of numbers. And I feel like I know some of the folks on the committee, but then I see faces and I realize like, oh, no, never met in person.
Well, and still, we're getting to know folks well on Zoom though. Okay, Josh, do you want to just sort of kick us off and then I'll say a couple words about the Zoom piece and go into introductions?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're glad to finally get this project started and thank you all for hanging with us. I know it's taken a little while to kick off fully, but we're excited to have you here. Once again, I'm Joshua Palmieri. I'm a senior city planner with CPD. I'll be the project manager for this project and we made it. Here we are, advisory committee meeting 1. We'd love to give everybody a second to introduce themselves, see who each other is, and get acquainted with who's in the room and why we're here. But first off, yeah, I guess we can kick it over to Ryan again.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that, so this is a Zoom webinar format, and we did it this way so that you all on the committee could talk with each other and hear from each other, but also that we could make it open to members of the public. So we have got a few dozen people joining and listening in. The meeting will also be posted and shared after the meeting and posted on the website. So wanted to let you know that. And I think first I would love to, we're excited because this is going to be a 7-month process. We'll be meeting with you all once a month or so. So we do want to do a go around right now and just hear who's who. I think first I'll kick it to you, Josh, and the city staff to do quick introductions, and then we'll start with the committee members.
Sure, yeah, you guys have just heard from me, senior city planner, Josh. We'll get to know each other well through this process. I have been thinking about ADUs personally for a very long time, so it's near and dear to my heart. My background is in architecture, so I'm excited to project manage this project. Also on staff, we have Abe Barge. Go ahead, Abe.
And I'm Abe. Good to see everyone. I work with Josh in the planning department and have a lot of background in zoning and design, along with Josh.
We also have Libby Kaiser.
Good evening, all. Nice to meet you. I'm Libby Kaiser, senior city planner with Denver, and I'm excited to be helping out with this project and kicking it off with all of you.
Okay, we have one more staff member, Fran Peñafel. Is she able to? I have friends there.
Hi, my name is Fran, and I'm also a city planner, and I also have a background in architecture, so I'm very excited to be working in this project. I'm also part of the urban design team, so it's going to be a fun project.
Thank you all. And I think we'll turn to the committee members now. I should say that my colleague Elizabeth Hummel is going to be managing the Zoom. So if you have issues, she's on standby and she's here as well. Okay, so for the committee, here's what we were thinking we'd ask you to do. If I'm going to just go through and maybe Josh, you can pull up the committee introductions and we'll just the slide so that people know kind of what order they're going in. So I'll sort of call your name and ask if you could share who you are, where you're from in the city, and also one thing you most love or appreciate about your neighborhood. So I think we'll start with the city council. We're very excited and happy to have a couple of city council reps on this committee. And so I'd love to hear from Councilman Herndon, and also I think Councilwoman Black's aide is here. And so we're going to hear from Kathy Geil as well. And then we'll go to the planning commission. I think we have a planning board member here as well, Kosha. So let's hear from you three first. Go ahead.
Kathy, go ahead from Councilwoman Black's office.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hi, Kathy Geil, Senior Aide for Councilwoman Black, District 4, which is Southeast Denver. Councilwoman Black and I actually live in the same neighborhood, so I speak for both of us when we live in a beautiful neighborhood, but we really love our neighbors. And we actually are fortunate to be less than a mile close to Colorado Boulevard, a commercial corridor. So there's convenience as well as a great neighborhood.
Thank you.
Chris Herndon, Denver City Council District 8, and I do want to apologize. My son has a 5 o'clock appointment, so I need to take him to. But what I appreciate, I'll talk about the district, and what I'm excited about in this project is something I'm working on is allowing ADUs throughout District 8. Councilwoman Sawyer and I participated in doing a legislative overlay so that East Colfax homeowners no longer have to go through the individual rezoning process for ADUs. So now that is something that is allowed in East Colfax, used by right, depending on your lot size. So and I love the fact that you can do ADUs in almost all different parts of the district, because I believe there's something that they desperately needed, and I'm excited about being on this committee. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Kosha Kang, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm Kosha Kang. I serve on the Denver Planning Board. I'm an architect. That's a day job. I live in Sloan's Lake, and I love Sloan's Lake, but I also am fortunate that recently we were rezoned to allow ADUs in our neighborhood, even though I live in a duplex, so I already have 2 units on my lot. So I won't be taking advantage of ADUs, but I'm glad that my neighbors can do it.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm just gonna call folks in order, and on my list is Gabriel Calderon, Gabe, and then Zeke Friedrich and Emily Goodman. So maybe we'll just go in that order.
Okay, my name's Gabriel Calderon, but I'll go by Gabe. I am a native Denver, right? Actually, North Denver. So I'm excited to be part of this committee. Some of the things that I really like about where I live is the 2 surrounding parks by me, Rocky Mountain Lake Park and Berkeley Park. And also the Tennyson corridor that's in our area. We just have a lot of amenities and stores and options, restaurants, just things to do within walking distance. So that's what I like about my neighborhood. And I'm also representing the Berkeley Regis United Neighbors RNO. So I'm participating, and I'll report back to them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right. So
yeah,
I'm Zeke Friedrich with I'm an architect with Radix Design. We love designing ADUs. I'm in the Baker neighborhood. In Baker, we've been looking at a conservation overlay for ADUs at some time. So we've been thinking hopefully about some of the stuff we'll be talking about here. And I love Baker because it's very creative and it's diverse, though our diversity is more threatened these days.
Thank you.
And I'm Emily Goodman. I'm a community navigator with East Colfax Community Collective. So I am here as a representative, kind of representing the community members of East Colfax. And one of the things that I absolutely love about East Colfax and a lot of Denver is the diversity with more immigrant and refugee populations as well. So that's definitely my favorite thing.
Thank you. It's great to hear from you all. Okay, Naomi Gruntz and Mary Hawthorne. I don't know if she's here yet. And Chelsea Hume, please go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name's Naomi Gruntz and I'm wearing a couple of hats on this committee. I'm a Clayton resident and have a lot of background in ADUs because I'm also an aide for Councilman Sandoval. Councilman Sandoval's office did the rezonings in Sloan's Lake, Chaffee Park, and where else did we do it? We're submitting our application for Regis as well. So I come here with that background, but I'll say I love about Clayton, where I live. I love walking around and seeing the detail that people have grown into their homes over the years and finding, like, for instance, the house that is kind of unremarkable most of the year, but puts on the most insane Christmas lights you've ever seen in your life. Or the house that does all the fireworks before the July, which is a controversial topic in the neighborhood, but there's just so many wonderful little details and stories. I love walking the neighborhood.
Thank you. Mary, please go next. I see you.
Hi, I don't have a lot of credentials like most of you sound like. I live in Wellshire, or Cherry Hills Heights. I'm a member of the Homeowners Association. And the thing I love most about my neighborhood are the large yards, the people, and the proximity to Colorado Boulevard, University Boulevard. And it's just beautiful there. And of course, the people.
Thank you. Chelsea.
Hey, I'm Chelsea Hume. I am an architect and I work for Habitat for Humanity of Metro Denver. And I also live in Virginia Village. I think my favorite thing about Virginia Village is the access to the highway, so it's easy to get everywhere, and also all the great people who live in my neighborhood.
Thank you so much. Okay, so on my list is Lisa Karen Welch, and then Pam Jiner and Jennifer Stoffel Johnson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Karen Welch, and I am an educator for real estate agents and their clients on how to build wealth with their current assets. I am a member of STRAC, so I'm fairly familiar with Abe. Hey, Abe, how you doing? I've loved being on that committee, so I'm so excited to be on this one. I work for ADU for You, and they are building an accessory dwelling unit in our backyard currently, which has been so fun. And what else? Oh, I live in Mayfair, and we moved here 19 or 20 years ago because I loved the uniqueness of each home, the diversity of the neighborhood, and I loved the diversity of the public schools here that I wanted our children to attend. So we love Mayfair.
Thank you. Pam.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Pam Jiner. I represent the Montbello area, co-chair of our registered neighborhood organization here. And what I love about Montbello is its diversity and our children. I'm in a park right now, and they are having so much fun out here playing together. It's just the most beautiful thing in the world. So yeah, I'm here because Montbello too has large lots, and we want to know all we can find out about ADUs for those who want to build them. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Jennifer. Let's see, is Jennifer here? I'm looking for her on the screen.
Oh yeah, I think she said she might have had a delay today as well.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
We'll come back to her if she pops up. Okay, Sean Johnson, and then Tara Mazzeo and Brooke Murphy. Go ahead. Let's see, is Sean here?
Yes, my name is Sean Johnson.
There you are.
Hey everyone, I'm excited to be here. I live in Sunnyside. One of the reasons I wanted to join is because my family is in the process of building an ADU, but we faced a lot of hurdles in that experience, and I wanted to hopefully come and be a voice in providing solutions or hearing what direction we want to go in as Denver. I live in Sunnyside, and one of the things I love about Sunnyside is its proximity to get to a lot of places, to jump on I-70 for the mountains or to go downtown, but also that the folks here seem to have an intentionality on what kind of community they want to build, whether that's in housing or how we communicate and connect with our neighbors. And I appreciate that part of Sunnyside.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here. Tara.
Hi, Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Tara Mazzio. I am an architect and an urban designer. I'm also a 4th generation native of Denver. My interest in ADUs goes back a long ways too, along with kind of other low-rise housing typologies that could help to densify Denver and provide tools to solve our housing crisis. I work for Stantec, a big architecture firm, and I also have founded a small company called Alley Flats, which focuses on finding ways to prefabricate ADUs. I live in City Park West, which I love, and everyone is saying that they love the people in their neighborhoods, and that's my favorite thing about my neighborhood too. But we also have a lot of really cool little tiny local businesses that I love to walk to.
Thank you. Brooke.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke Murphy. I have a bit of a planning background, and I currently work for a community land trust that's based in Denver. So I'm kind of coming at this through the lens of, using a community land trust as also a creative financing tool for creating and allowing more ADUs to be built. And something that I love about La Alma Lincoln Park, I'm sorry, there's like a dog right outside my window that's just going crazy.
It's going to start all the dogs barking in everyone's background.
Is I think it's the walkability of the neighborhood that's really just afforded by the building scale, the mix of uses, the green space, and it's always just a really pleasant, pleasant just to walk anywhere, whether it's to a restaurant or just to clear your mind. So it's probably my favorite part.
Thank you. Thank you to the dogs as well. So Cesar Olivas, Suzanne Reed, and Donna Rep, I think you are up next.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Cesar Olivas. I'm an affordable housing architect. We're actually, our office is Shopper Architecture. We're in North Denver. And see, Chaffee Park. And actually, similar to what somebody else said before, I like to stretch it out more to North Denver. And it's just, I have a big extended family, and the opportunity to just be close to as much of my family is actually pretty important. Be able to be connected and just relying on my network and being able to have each other close by is actually pretty neat.
Thank you. And Cesar, there was background noise that made it a little hard to hear. So when you speak up next, you may need to speak louder, but I think we caught all that. So thank you so much. Suzanne. Let's see. Do we have Suzanne here? Yes. Suzanne, are you on mute? There you go.
I have laryngitis off and on today, so I apologize. Make this very quick. I was born in Denver, not raised here, moved back 20 years ago, picked my neighborhood, Berkeley Heights, because at the time it was very racially and economically diverse. We're going through mild gentrification, not like other parts of town. So we haven't had the quick growing pains a lot of places have. But I love my neighborhood because my neighbors are awesome. I like being so close to the highway to get to the mountains or get to wherever I need to go. And we picked the lot that we live on because of all the potential. And we're finally here where it's a possibility to build a small house for me to live in when I get old, and my kids can have my big house. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you. That's great to know. Donna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Rep, and I'm the past president for the South Marlee Brentwood Sharon Park Registered Neighborhood Organization. So we're one of the largest neighborhood organizations in Denver, and I love this neighborhood because of the diverse neighbors. We have a lot of diversity here, like Suzanne, economically, racially, you name it. And we are also in the middle of redeveloping Loretto Heights, which is awesome. And they're going to do a lot of really great things there. So we have some changes coming down the road, and I am here to learn more about ADUs and how they're going to fit into this Southwest Denver community.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I think I mispronounced your last name, but thanks all of you. Okay, so last on my list are Sarah Sandershoff, Rosemary Stoffel, and Renee Martinez Stone. And then I don't know if Michelle is here yet. I think maybe she's not. Michelle Frino.
Yeah,
Oh, you are?
great.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to Michelle Frino Warren and Darcy Wilson. So if you all can remember that order, we'll start with Sarah.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Sandershoff with L&D Construction, and our company has been specializing in ADUs since 2017. We've built about 35 ADUs and have about 10 more in the process. So I've been through the permitting process with the city, been through design with architects, and then through the building process. So I'm excited to be here and to be part of this committee. I recently moved to the Park Hill neighborhood. I was engaged and moved in with my fiance. We recently got married, and we're actually in the process of building or designing a tandem home in the Baker neighborhood. I love all the things about the Baker neighborhood that Zeke Friedrich mentioned earlier. And the Park Hill neighborhood is a bit new for me, but I've loved living here. I love the walkability. I love the large lots. And, you know, I love the potential that maybe this is a neighborhood where we could see some ADUs in the future. And it's been a great place to live. And while I'm on this board, I'll be living in the Park Hill neighborhood. But once we finish up, I'll be moving to Baker. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosemary.
I'm Rosemary Stoffel. I live in the University Park neighborhood, which is directly east of the University of Denver. We're between I-25 in Yale and Colorado and University. So we're in proximity to 2 light rail stations and also to I-25. The things that I love about my neighborhood and that many of my neighbors have mentioned in our small area plan that we love about our neighborhood is we're described as a neighborhood in a park. We have a lot of green space. We have a lot of tree coverage. We have 3 parks in the neighborhood, and we still have quite a few of our historic homes left. So we're in one of Denver's older established neighborhoods, and we just have a great feel. And we have a very engaged community. We've been engaged in a lot of different, excuse me, I think I'm getting laryngitis too, zoning issues and preservation issues in our neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Renee, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Renee Martinez Stone, and I direct the Planning and Data Department for the Denver Housing Authority. I have the great pleasure of directing and working with a great team that leads the West Denver Single Family Plus ADU pilot program. And we work with homeowners to build ADUs. And we last year put into construction or permit 11 units. And our target this year is 20. So working with some great partners and some great homeowners who have really great reasons for building ADUs. I live in West Highlands, and one of my favorite things about this neighborhood is just other long-term residents who've been here, dug in, had babies. Now they were in neighborhood schools. Now we've seen them graduate, and we're becoming empty nesters. So lots of years helping one another and just being a part of this little neighborhood community. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Michelle Brigno Warren and glad to be a part of this committee. I lived the last 26 years, have lived in the Athmar Park community. For those of you who may not know its boundaries, it's Federal, Alameda, Mississippi, and Santa Fe. And so I think many people know that one of the great things about our neighborhood is definitely the diverse cultural cuisine and just a lot of the flair. As far as ADUs go, I have a personal interest just because I've been working in the nonprofit sector for quite a while, and homelessness and affordability around housing is definitely something on a personal level that I want to do whatever I can to support more housing. And as far as ADUs, Athmar Park, we've been talking about trying to rezone the neighborhood. We just finished up our community survey, so hopefully, here we're kind of on a trajectory to hopefully do what some of you others have done on the committee to rezone. And as far as me personally, why I love my neighborhood, I'm going to say the exact same thing that Renee shared. That's what I love, is the longevity and the history. One neighbor to one side of me is in her 90s, another one fought in the Korean War, and then we have like young couples that just got married and have their little puppy. So it's a great community where people have dug roots and have really taught many of us how to dig some roots and really invest in each other.
Thank you so much. So great to hear from everyone. Darcy, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
You are. Yeah.
I am in the Cole neighborhood, and I walk my dogs all the time up in the Clayton neighborhood. We just had that 39th Avenue Greenway that was put together, and so I really spend a lot of time between the two neighborhoods. What I love most about my neighborhood are the businesses along Bruce Randolph Avenue. I can walk down and get my hair cut at one end, come all the way up and have gumbo at Nola's, and then just continue the way, walk around the neighborhood and be a part of it. Many of my focus is with United Northeast Denver residents is that we are looking for many of the longstanding members of our community and trying to help them remain in their homes and to help support some added income into their homes. I work a lot with contractors, and one of the reasons why I wanted to be on this committee is that I built an ADU, and the process took 18 months, and that was really a long time for me and the homeowner, just trying to go through all of the loopholes that the city had. And I think there's a better way that we can get it more streamlined. I also work with, I've been in the construction industry for, when my hair was jet black and I was real. So I've been in it for quite a few years, and also to add with the design, helping homeowners come up with an easier way to where they can afford to have this built by having them kind of come up with a cookie cutter type view. Hi, Ozzy. So that's pretty much what we do over here.
Thank you. So good to hear. And I mean, as everyone just can see, this is an amazing group of people representing such a wide swath of the city and so many different interests and experiences. So that's why you're on this committee. We're so grateful that you are. I will say I live outside the city, but I'm from the area, and my husband is a third generation Denverite. My kids are now fourth generation Coloradans. So anyway, this is all really fun to hear. I want to just tell you a couple things about tonight's meeting and what to expect, including the format, which also applies to people in the audience. I think that we might have another council person here with us. Is that true, Gabe or Abe or Josh? Do you want to mention? Okay, in the audience, I thought maybe that.
Yeah, it was just, I think Councilman Flynn is in the audience. So hi, Councilman Flynn, thank you for joining us. Just wanted to recognize you. And we'll have some time for general comment later in the meeting. And then I think Ryan will tell everyone about the Q&A function as well.
Yep, exactly. So just a couple things about how this is going to work and what we're going to cover tonight. So first of all, we're going to talk about just an overview of the project, an overview of your role as committee members, what the city is expecting will come out of this process, to give you a lay of the land and a chance at the end of that presentation for you all to ask any questions, and then have a polling exercise to get a little bit more to tease out some of the things that many of you started talking about just now in terms of what's important to you. about ADUs. Then we'll hear just background and context to bring everyone up to speed and put folks on the same page about what you may need to know about this project. And again, we'll have a chance for some questions, and then have some questions for you about what you see as major benefits, concerns, things like that at a high level about ADUs. And then finally, we will talk about the process, how this committee is going to do its work briefly, and we will have 15 minutes at the very end for public comment. So that's sort of an overview of what we're doing. And in terms of how this, the discussion will be among the committee, and it's a furious, fast and furious 2-hour meeting. So we ask that you put as much as you can in terms of questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to those when we have time for questions at the end of each section. And then for those of you who are listening in the audience, who are participating otherwise, there is a Q&A function on the bottom of your Zoom. And so feel free to use that. We've got folks, we have one city person who's monitoring that, and we'll try to answer brief questions in real time. Questions that are longer or more in depth, we'll just hang on to. We'll reply with either a frequently asked question sheet on the website. We'll put answers in the meeting summary, and we'll otherwise follow up at the next meeting. So know that all your questions are being tracked. If we don't get to them tonight, we will definitely get to them, and same with the chat as well. Let's see, what else did I want to say to you about format? I think that's about it. We are, as I said, recording the meeting, and it will be available to all of you afterwards, as well as the meeting summary. And then before we dive in, I think I just wanted to say in terms of process that we would ask all of you in the interest of time, just to keep comments short and succinct if you can. And I think in terms of like ground rules, just bringing an open mind, curiosity, and part of what you're doing is educating, providing input to the city, and also just educating each other and sharing ideas, and hopefully coming up, because of the power of the group, coming up with even better ideas than anyone's had so far. So thank you for all of that. And with that, I am going to, unless I missed something, Abe or Josh, I think we're going to go into the presentation. Okay. So Josh is going to share his screen, and we're going to start talking about the project. As we go through, if you have questions about an individual slide, please feel free to raise your hand in the chat, use the chat raise hand function, or just put your hand up. And otherwise, if you could hold your questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of that brief part of that presentation. That would be great.
Yeah, so thanks a bunch. I am screen sharing now. Can you see that, right? We are good to go. Thanks. Okay. Appreciate it. Yeah, really excited to get started. Thanks for attending, everyone. As you can see, we've got a very diverse group here, not only geographically, but experience-wise, and really interested to hear from all of you. So in that vein, we want to start just at a really, really high level and talk about, what exactly is an ADU? What are we really talking about here? And so an ADU is, essentially an extension of someone's home, someone's primary structure, as it's called in the zoning code. It is not a separate property. It cannot be sold off separately like something like a duplex or a tandem house could be. So it is under the same ownership as the primary structure. It's essentially a self-contained living space with its own amenities like kitchen, sleeping quarters, et cetera, et cetera. They're often called, various things like a granny flat, millennial suite, a backyard cottage, attic loft, casita, things like that. But what's important here is that it is accessory to a primary single dwelling unit use. And so just like a personal accessory, like a hat or a piece of jewelry, it is always accessory to the primary. In the zoning code, we do fully define what an ADU is. So we have, a strict definition about what that means. What's important in the definition is that it's on the same zone lot as a primary single unit dwelling use. Zone lot is to say, essentially your parcel, your property. And it is also defined as an accessory use. And so this use definition is important. It's similar to if someone was to open up a commercial store, their use allowance would be a commercial use in order to do that. And so the important thing here is that the accessory use is only allowed currently in conjunction to a single unit dwelling use. ADUs can also be, they're clearly defined in the code as being an attached version or a detached version. So you can see here in the graphic that an attached ADU can be internalized in the sense of it could be like an attic loft or a basement apartment, or it can also be an extension or potentially, an addition to an existing home, but that's defined as being part of that internal structure, the envelope of the primary structure, versus a detached ADU, which is a separate building entirely, typically at the rear of the lot, as you see on that bottom graphic. And the detached ADU is something that, we'll be spending a little bit more time, I think, throughout this committee, throughout this year, talking about, as that's what we're seeing as being the more, popular sort of build. What this project is not about, we want to be very clear about this one. There's a lot of potential confusion out there that folks think that we are allowing ADU citywide. We are not doing that in this project. It's not scoped for us to undertake. It's not a citywide rezoning, which is, that process is called the rezoning process. We're not allowing ADUs everywhere. We're not actually changing where they are allowed, but we are looking at what you can build as an ADU when they are allowed. And so, to be really clear, we do have that recommendation in Blueprint Denver, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but we've heard very clearly from the community that the entire city is not ready to allow ADUs everywhere. We are still leaving that rezoning process up to individual property owners, neighborhood planning processes, and some individual council members can also come forward with a larger legislative rezoning, like some of the work Councilman Herndon mentioned previously in East Colfax. They just rezoned about 2,000 properties in the East Colfax neighborhood, and that came off the heels of a neighborhood planning process. And so we are still following that process for now. But what is in the scope of this project? And so we are clearly tasked with removing barriers to ADU construction, but also making sure that they fit in to different types of neighborhoods and block patterns throughout Denver. So as we know, there's a lot of different diverse neighborhoods throughout Denver, different lot sizes, alleys, no alleys in suburban neighborhoods, things like that. And so we want to make sure that before we allow the ADUs in those neighborhoods, we want to make sure the ADU fits into that context, into that neighborhood character. So we will be fully proposing revisions to the Denver zoning code, which the Denver zoning code is what dictates the allowance for an ADU. So it dictates the shape, size, and potential location of ADUs. So your role in the process will be to help us out, to have those conversations with us. We want to know what exactly some of those barriers are to construction. Some things like, what should the height be? Is the height enough height? Is it too tall, too short? Is the square footage allowance enough? The area that is allowed to be an ADU? You're going to help us identify some of those alternatives. We'll go back and forth, propose some potential alternatives. You listen to your proposals. You're essentially going to be a sounding board for us. So we will present to you a lot of what we heard from your feedback, from the community's feedback through online engagement and other events, but using you guys as a sounding board to help us fully create those new accessory dwelling unit form standards. And in the end, we're going to need your help to help us advise City Council to fully adopt the final proposed package of zoning code amendments that we come up with. How are you guys providing that input? We are going to use you guys to help us identify some of the areas of alignment, some concerns that you have, any challenges that you may have in your specific neighborhoods, but also what tools we should use to address them. We want you to represent the unique needs of your neighborhood context. So lots of diverse neighborhoods, lots of diverse issues. We really want to talk about what's important to you and how we can address it. We expect you to fully work collaboratively with us, city staff, but also other committee members and the larger community as a whole. We will be also attending, many focus group meetings and having those community discussions, online engagement, etc. So we'll go into more of that detail later on. But essentially, we want you to serve as a voice of equity throughout this entire process. That policy it's consistent with our citywide policy. We are to be an equitable and inclusive city. We want to make sure that this process, with your involvement, does just that. Okay, so why exactly, are we doing this work? We know that Denver's growing, right? We all feel that. We know that the way that the city grows, the way that people live is currently changing as well. We know a lot of folks are interested in expanding their household in some way, creating separate spaces. We're getting a lot of interest in in-laws moving back to the city to be closer to family, or recent college graduates moving back to home because of the affordability issues we have. And so a lot of folks need a little bit more of an independent space to where they can sort of live their own life, but also be close to family. We think it's a great way for folks to generate some income off of their property if need be, whenever issues do arise. We think it's a more affordable, smaller space in an existing neighborhood, which is important and which we're losing quite a bit of as the city is growing. And we know that property owners are really interested in the idea of just having more flexibility with their property and with their investment now and in the future. I think COVID has shown a light on a lot of those living situations, with more folks working from home, needing extra office space. And so that condition is now 2020, 2022, and in 2040, it can be something entirely different. ADUs, we feel, are a very important part of the blueprint strategy to help existing residents to remain and prosper in their current neighborhoods. We love this idea that ADUs can actually be an anti-displacement strategy. We want folks to actually be able to reinvest in their property. We hear a lot about gentrification and folks that possibly have owned their home for a long time. They're seeing their property taxes rise. And so we're hoping that ADUs is a way to actually combat that, allow folks to reinvest in their property and potentially earn some income and find a way to remain in place. We're also interested in the idea of expanding those housing options in existing neighborhoods. Many of Denver's, older neighborhoods, or even don't have the housing options that folks are looking for nowadays. There's a lot of just 2, 3, 4 bedroom homes in, say, Montbello, for example. It's really hard to find just a 1-bedroom dwelling unit if you wanted one, or even a 2-bedroom. And so we think ADUs are a great way to expand those options and allow more folks to be included in those neighborhoods that they would like to be. Some of the benefits of ADUs are the fact that there isn't really a land cost associated with the development. Land costs are skyrocketing in Denver. Here's an example actually from my neighborhood. This smallest parcel in Denver, 3,000 square foot property, sold for $250,000. These things, don't feel like they're that sustainable. You have to put a house on top of that, which is going to cost, double that. So we're talking $750,000 potentially for this house, and you're going to have to rent that out for $5,000. That's the smallest possible lot in Denver that you could build on. 3,000 square feet is, a lot of people have homes that big. And so ADUs are smaller. We limit them in size. So there's thresholds that we'll go into. We'll get into some of the details, but typically we're seeing a lot of 650 square foot ADUs built, and you can only charge, so much for rent for that small of a square footage. And so there's a bit of a natural affordability that occurs there. We think it's a more efficient use of resources and infrastructure, just using the existing infrastructure that we have, streets, alleys, things like that, but also they're cheaper to heat and cool as they are smaller structures. And so it can be a bit of a more sustainable way to look at adding housing. And because of the ownership allowances and the use allowances that we'll look at further, ADUs are typically built by the homeowner, and they continue to own that, maintain and keep ownership of that property. ADUs are definitely increasing. We're seeing lots of folks express interest in the idea of having an ADU, specifically with that blueprint Denver language that we'll look at, adopted in 2019. It did recommend that ADUs be allowed in all residential districts throughout the city. You can see from the chart here, they've steadily increased since 2010 when we did reintroduce them through the Denver zoning code. And these conversations are happening in different parts of town. People in suburban neighborhoods are becoming more interested in ADUs. As I said before, Denver's a popular place to be. It's no secret. The secret is out. The 2020 census just revealed, how popular exactly Denver is. We grew by approximately 115,000 people in one decade, which is the largest growth margin in Denver's entire history. And that trajectory is predicted to keep going. Blueprint Denver has some projections, and we are estimated to actually hit a population of 850,000, which would be yet another 150,000 people moving here by 2040. And, each one of these folks that are moving here needs a place to live. So we also know that we are in a housing crisis, right? The current Denver estimation is that we are short 60,000 housing units. That's today. We're going to continue to grow. And the average Denver home sale price is currently at $600,000. We're seeing that increase month after month. We keep breaking records as far as how expensive it is to live here. Most of the country saw a pretty big increase, 20% in the housing market due to supply issues and COVID, but it's been a trend for a few years, especially here in Denver. And so in the midst of this housing crisis, we think that ADUs are just one part of the solution that can help us start to address some of those issues. Okay, now we'll send it to Abe for just a quick background on some of those plans that I mentioned and where we're headed.
Great, thanks, Josh. And we are getting close to a stopping point, so don't worry. And so Josh talked about the benefits of accessory dwelling units and why we need to be talking about them and housing in general. But at the same time, this could be a really big conversation, and we want to continue to kind of remind ourselves of what boundaries are around this project. So the objectives that we've established for this project are based on City Council adopted plans, comprehensive plan, and Blueprint Denver, which both were extensively updated in the last few years and readopted. And Blueprint Denver is really where we get most of our information about objectives. And then we're specifically starting with one part of Blueprint Denver. If you go to the next slide, Josh, wouldn't expect you to be able to read any of this, but Blueprint Denver, this is just an indication that there's a whole series of recommendations about housing and design in Blueprint Denver, which is a plan that was a result of 3 years of community outreach, dozens of meetings and workshops, and arrived at these recommendations. And they range from recommendations about the architects and housing folks on the committee know what missing middle housing is, kind of planning jargon for duplexes and row houses, and the need for more of that, as well as the need to address design generally within neighborhoods. And then they also zero in on accessory dwelling units and both the desire to enable them in more places, and then finally to get it right in terms of the rules, which is really where we are in this project as a foundation for that bigger conversation. And so that's really, our marching orders here come primarily from Blueprint Denver Land Use Recommendation number 5. And it's a little hard to read on the slide here, but if you could read it, you'd recognize a lot of the things it says probably because they relate so closely to what Josh talked about as being our project objectives in terms of, removing barriers to ADUs while at the same time making sure they fit in with a variety of neighborhoods. So you can go on to the next slide. And this is the last thing I just want to emphasize before we get to questions and then a little interactive activity is also just reinforcing that although we're trying to bound this project with a pretty distinct scope in order to be able to get through it and build that conversation for the bigger project about housing and design in the city, we do expect really specific results. And The big one is that we will propose an update to the zoning code. A text amendment is the planning jargon again for that. And that will go into an adoption process where City Council would consider it for adoption in a public hearing, which that would probably occur in early 2023. But because that process takes so long, starting with planning board and moving through a number of steps, we really have the proposal ready in later this year. And we also want to, as we move through this process with you and with the public, prepare a series of reports, like in each phase of the project, that will build together into one strategy report, which will say, here's what's proposed, and here's why, and here's what the conversation was that led up to that. And that will include points of relative agreement or disagreement on the committee, in the community. We certainly don't expect everyone to agree with where we arrive, but what we do want is to record that whole conversation for the decision makers, primarily City Council, to consider when looking at adopting that text amendment. And then, finally, there'll be some things that come up that are really important to discuss that really can't be addressed with zoning updates, and we'll have to kind of just be forwarded to other agencies or monitored to figure out how we can accomplish them in the future. So we'll record all of that as part of this process too. So let's go onward, and it's probably Ryan will take over again just to see if you have any initial questions before we do an activity.
That sounds good. I don't see anything in the chat. And so knowing that we're going to be turning after a little poll with you all to some more technical background, does anyone have any questions? I see one from Darcy about slide 14, that it shows a significant decrease in the amount of ADUs being built. But it looks like this slide is speculating that ADU construction will rebound. And the question is, with extreme cost of materials and supply chain issues, how many new ADU permits have been issued during this year? So I think, I don't know, Josh.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we've definitely seen a decline due to COVID. I think 2021 was our low year, but yeah, we are seeing an increase. It's hard to pull our active numbers as we go, but that's something that, yeah, we can gather for you and have more information on in our next meeting. It is predicted that, yes, they are increasing again. And we've got quite a few builders, professionals in the committee here that I'm sure are happy to entertain some of those answers as well.
I think, does anyone have anything else pressing? And if not, I want to keep us moving so that we can get a little bit of input from you all in this poll. Any other pressing questions right now about what you heard? Okay. So, and just a reminder that the Q&A for attendees, that's being monitored and answered. And Libby, if there are questions that you think really we should spend time answering, please direct them to us. But otherwise, I think we'll keep things moving along. Abe, do you want to start off with the poll, and we'll get people's input in that. And I think we'll have to make up a little bit of time here. So in the chat, you'll see a link. And so if you go to your chat, press the link, and Abe is going to give you a little bit of instruction. If anyone is having trouble opening the link, let us know.
And so I'll mention for the members of the public that are in the audience, the link that we just sent, it is just available to committee members. And that's basically because this is the first meeting of the committee, and we're really hoping to give committee members a chance to get to know each other and communicate with us. We'll create a survey that has some similar questions to this and get it on the project website probably next week. So for those of you out there that want to weigh in, you can do that. And then of course, you can also just provide general comments to us on the website as well. So let me get my own chat window open and see if anyone's having any trouble. Don't see anybody indicating any trouble following the link. but feel free to come off mic if you have a technical difficulty or something like that. Otherwise, hopefully we're ready.
Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. Let's move forward to a very hard-hitting question, which will determine the outcome of this project. And we'll also test whether the technology is working. Which kitten is cutest? Right. You think, how many total panelists do we have? 24 or so?
3. Yeah.
3. Okay. Some of us are staff, right? So when we get up to about 20-ish votes, we'll just say that we're done. So we're probably there with the cute kittens. Oh, cat two.
And if anyone is having trouble with the link, put a note in the chat and we will troubleshoot with you as well.
So looks like we have a tie between cat 3 and cat 4, both adorable. I think cat 1 and cat 2 are quite cute too. All right, let's move on. We're going to kind of ease into it. Some of the questions are silly, not quite this silly, but I want to just give you a chance to give us some initial feedback, get the juices flowing. So Josh already has used a few different names for ADUs kind of in his presentation, but what are some of the things that you've heard to describe an accessory dwelling unit? Mini flat, carriage house, casita. Oh, we got a new one I've never heard, Fonzie flat.
What would you call it? Yeah.
Awesome. Short flats. So far, there are 2 things I don't think I've ever heard of. Short flat and Fonzie flat.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of love for the carriage house, which we'll go into some of those details later in the presentation, but
Whoever mentioned Fonzie flat, if you're willing to put something in the chat about what's the Fonzie part of that? Is that where Fonzie, did Fonzie live in one?
Yes.
Oh,
okay. That's really cool.
Nice.
All right, we're up to 15 folks have weighed in. Just a little more time. That's right.
We're going to have to rewrite our definition in the code then to add Fonzie.
Right. And laneway houses, I know I have heard that because that's what they tend to call them in Canada, I know, where accessory dwelling units have been a big thing in large Canadian cities.
Yeah, Vancouver, very popular there. That's right. Cool.
Garden flat, cool. Yeah. All right, we're up to 17. That's about 18. These are all great. And we'll download a report on this too, which we can attach to the summary of this meeting if you're curious. They're scrolling by kind of fast. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is pretty open-ended. So the question is, what is most important to you about accessory dwelling units in Denver? And, you know, probably I would take this as like, what's important for accessory dwelling units, but you could also say what you think should be most important for this particular project, or maybe they're kind of the same thing. Affordability.
Yeah, and this should have the word cloud effect. So the more that the term is used, the larger that word will appear.
And you know, you're allowed to say negative things if you want, but that's okay. I mean, I don't want to like encourage you necessarily, but you certainly can. Got a pretty positive group. It's cool.
So it looks like at least Rosemary is having trouble adding text.
Okay.
Abe.
And so is Kathy. So Rosemary, feel free to come off mic. Have you been able to answer any of the questions?
The first one with the cat.
Okay, you could answer that, but now you can't?
I can't add text.
Oh,
I can't.
You're on a
are
phone?
you on your phone?
No, I'm on my computer.
Okay. You know,
it's a Mac.
It should be fine. You could close the browser window that opened in and try to click on the link again if you want.
The other thing, Rosemary, and anyone else who's having this trouble, Kathy, is send us just a private message in the chat and we can input it. Somebody can input it for you, even after the fact. So please just, you can send a private message to any of Josh, Abe, or myself, and we'll just track it.
Thank you.
We'll try to troubleshoot before the next meeting so that we can figure this out.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a lot of great stuff.
We're
With
supposed
affordability right at the center.
are
Go ahead, Mary.
Are we supposed to be answering in the chat?
No, answer in the Mentimeter poll if you're able directly.
Like click on the, okay.
Did you get the link?
Yeah. So Mary, do you see the link that Abe posted at 5:23? And are you able to pull that up and go into it? And if not, Mary, I think what we'll do just to keep us all going is that for a few of you are having trouble with the Mentimeter, already a couple of you have sent me individual notes and we will get these included with the final results. And so you can just send me a private note or Abe or Josh and we'll include them.
Okay.
And then we can
Yes.
troubleshoot with you between meetings to get this working.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, sounds good. So Mary in the chat just wanted to give one upvote for affordability, which is already kind of the most common response. So I'll move on in just a moment, or anyone like wave your hands wildly if you don't want me to move to the next one.
No, I see a lot of good things here, you know, not so difficult to permit, remove barriers, affordability, obviously, sustainability, good stuff. Not to be used as a hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely some concerns and a lot of interest in here. Easy requirements.
Right, a lot of stuff about the removing barriers in addition to affordability and cost. Yeah, great. All right, I will move on. Just a couple more here. So this one, we're asking about which statements describe your interest in the ADUs in Denver project. This is one where, at least for those of you where the technology is working, you can respond to each one of the statements with how much you agree or disagree by kind of pulling a little slider along if it's working right. So for example, the first statement is, I'm hoping to learn and engage, hoping to learn more and engage in neighborhood dialogue. And if that's like one of your primary interests, then you would drag that, you know, way over to the right to strongly agree. And you can just do that for each one. The last one is, the statement is, I want to address topics not addressed by the statements above. So that's just a catch-all for either none of the statements above represent your interest, or there really are other things that are really important to you. And thanks, Rosemary, for the responses on the previous question in the chat. We'll get those in there. Rosemary said opportunity to incentivize historic designation and the need for nuanced design guidance, like for ADUs to fit into different types of neighborhoods. All right. So far, ensuring that existing residents are able to stay in their neighborhood and promoting expanded housing options in existing neighborhoods are of the greatest interest to members of this committee.
And we have one more vote for wanting to ensure new construction is designed to fit into existing neighborhoods. Strongly agree.
And we'll move on in just a moment, but while folks are finishing pulling their sliders around, does anyone who said that they would like to address topics not addressed by the statements above, feel free to put that in the chat, what the statement is, or you're also welcome, just in the next minute or two to come off mic and say what that is.
Yeah, it looks like Naomi has one.
Way to call me out. I was going to add working towards sustainability goals, including preserving and reusing existing structures.
Great.
Definitely very important.
There's a comment also from Ozzy. We need more flexibility to design sustainable and creative ADUs. So please feel free to put other thoughts in the chat, and we will record these as other in addition to what you all put on the slider poll. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're getting close to the end. Okay. You or anyone you know live or has lived in an accessory dwelling unit. And when we were creating this question, I learned that both our facilitator, Ryan, and Josh, our fearless project manager, have formerly lived in ADUs. I got that right, didn't I?
Yeah, that's right. I lived in a casita, Santa Fe, New Mexico for a bit. It was great. Fit my needs.
Yep.
Perfectly.
One in Santa Fe, one in Albuquerque for me, 300 square feet.
Awesome.
Let's see. Oh my gosh, I love that. Are you all surprised by this? You all at the city especially, did you know this many people on the committee had direct experience?
More popular than I thought, I think, yeah.
It's great. I gathered that from a lot of your introductions, but this is great. Josh, and Abe, I'm feeling like we should move ourselves along.
Yeah, we should. So all right, we just have one last question. Somebody used the word cool, and somebody used the word cute in the previous word cloud describing ADUs. And we're just asking which ADU is the coolest looking. This is, don't get too worried. We're not going to take the winner and propose a bunch of zoning tools to require that kind of thing. It's more just to start thinking about how things can be different, what the range of possibilities is. There's one really important thing missing from this question or the pictures that you see in it, which is the surroundings. And that's going to be really important as we move forward, is, while all of these accessory dwelling units might be kind of cute looking or cool looking, maybe, it probably really, really matters a lot, exactly what they're next to, as to how appropriate they would be. All these kind of look like they're just in the forest, except for the one on the right, just the least popular anyway.
I think the coolest one is if any of them are located in Denver.
Renee likes ADUs.
I think actually, maybe number 4, is that a Central Park example?
It looks like it to me.
I believe it is.
I'd like to
ADU 1, 2,
rescind
and
my
3, they
vote.
all look like Seattle or something. All right, so we need to move on, but thanks. And when I gave this little quiz to our staff, they also picked ADU too. I don't know, it's the only one that has that shed roof. Is that the reason? It just looks like it's in a really nice setting. Maybe that's it. Okay.
Okay, great. Well, we are going to transition here into a little more background, but first, before we do, is there anything from that people have been really great about posting in the chat, and we will record all of your comments and not attribute them to individuals, but we'll capture them for the meeting summary. Is there anything else anyone wants to say before we move on at this point? Just regarding any of that? Okay, great. So Josh, back to you. And again, if we can, where we condense, please try, and we'll try to get everyone out on time. We may skip our break if that's okay with everyone, so that we don't go over 6:30.
Okay, I think Abe, you just need to resend the screen share. There we go. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so jumping right back in, as Ryan mentioned, we will briefly go over just some of the background information. Hopefully you all had a chance to review and enjoy the background report. A lot of good stuff in there. It briefly goes over some of the evolution of ADUs in Denver, where they're being built today. We're going to also help you kind of understand what the rules are today and what needs to change, what we are tasked with actually doing by removing some of those barriers. So as many of you know, the ADUs have always really been a part of Denver. They're established in a lot of our historic neighborhoods like Curtis Park, Baker, Platt Park, places like that. Many of them have essentially turned into a carriage home over time. And so I saw that the carriage home term is quite popular amongst Denver as far as referring to an ADU. But, you know, a technicality is that a carriage home is actually another separate defined term in the code and is a different type of structure. Essentially, a carriage home exists on a carriage lot, which exists in the center of a block, which is a unique case. And so for all intents and purposes, it's not an ADU, but I too frequently refer to an ADU as a carriage home because, you know, it makes sense. It feels contextual here. At some point, you know, in 1954, I think is when the best we could find that ADUs have kind of fallen out of favor in the Denver zoning code. At that point, the city adopted a new code, which actually put in place single unit districts. So single unit only was then allowed to be what was built in most of Denver. And then most recently in 2010, when we updated the Denver zoning code, we adopted the Denver zoning code. We actually re-legalized ADUs in a lot of those locations where they previously had fallen out of favor. So looking at the map of where they're allowed today, they are technically allowed in any 2-unit or greater district in the city. So that is to say 2-unit meaning duplex. It's also allowed in multi-unit and mixed-use districts like row homes, townhomes, but it's a bit deceiving to look at the map and to think of them that way because you can see here in the tiny map that's shown, downtown is highlighted, and downtown, you know, technically, yes, you are allowed to build an ADU on the 16th Street Mall, but only if you have a single unit home there as well. And so we know that that's not the case. It doesn't really, you know, doesn't make sense to build an ADU there. You can build something much greater, like a whatever 30-story tower. And so what we really are interested in, this idea of the single unit districts, you know, where people really want to build them, where they're allowed, where they're building them in association with their primary single dwelling structure. So this map here shows in yellow where single unit districts are in the city that actually allow an ADU. And so you can see compared to the blue, which is the single unit districts that don't currently allow ADUs, we're actually only allowing ADUs in about 10% of our single unit districts across the city. And so once again, I mean, we're not tackling that rezoning issue. We are keeping that up to community feedback and looking at specific council districts to do that work of rezoning and allowing them in their neighborhoods. But before we get there, we want to make sure that the ADU is appropriate. So here's a map of where the ADUs have been built since 2010. We've actually only seen about 385 ADUs permitted since 2010. So, you know, not super popular at about 30, 35 per year, but we do know they are becoming more popular, right? Folks are becoming more interested. So you can see here some of those pockets where once we re-legalized ADUs in those bits of the city, like Platt Park, Berkeley, Curtis Park, Baker, things like that. We allowed them in 2010, and so folks had the ability and started to explore building them. Currently, ADUs are regulated just like any other building form. So if you were to build a new house, you would have to follow this extensive set of zoning rules. We'll go into this a lot more in detail in further meetings, but just a quick overview. I mean, the Denver zoning code is 1,300 pages long. It's a lot. It has rules for everything, but essentially an ADU falls in a building form envelope similar to if you were to add a garage on your property. So there is a square footage allowance, there is a height restriction, there's setbacks, side setbacks, rear setbacks. So how close or how far you can build to your neighbor's property or the rear of your property. There's also regulations on location structure and the building footprint, how long the building can be, things like that. So lots of rules, lots of things that are potential barriers, potentially good things, but we're going to take a look at all of them and see what is actually becoming a barrier to ADU construction today. Another important aspect of an ADU is when you're in a single unit district, like what I've shown on the map previously, the owner must live on the property full time in order to have an ADU use. So earlier I talked about that definition of the accessory use being clearly defined and needed. And so an accessory use is only allowed in association with a single unit use currently, and it's only if the owner claims their legal and permanent residence on that property. So if you live on the property, you can have an ADU, you can rent it out, you can live in the ADU, all the flexibility is there. But as soon as you own a property that you don't live in, say you wanted to be a landlord, you are actually no longer allowed to have the ADU on your property. You're not allowed to have the use of an ADU. So there's no fear of sort of, you know, potential distant landlords buying up a bunch of properties and trying to rent out a house and an ADU. It's clearly not allowed in the Denver zoning code currently in single unit districts. All right, so some of those potential barriers to explore, we've heard lots from the community, but we want to work with you guys and talk through them further. But some things we're looking at are the size limitations. ADUs are allowed to be 3 different size types based on your lot size. There's thresholds of 650 square feet up to 1,000 square feet, depending on how big your lot is. We really want to know if those numbers are right. You know, is 650 big enough? I mean, can you actually build a comfortable ADU, something that's functional in that space? Is the threshold set at the right lot size? We really want to balance the functionality, the cost, and the needs, but also with the neighborhood character. Building height is a funny one. It's technically 1.5 stories is what's allowed, 24 feet in height. And that's the same rule citywide. And so this one becomes an interesting barrier for folks because they often have to build a larger ground floor. Say in the example here, the ground floor garage needs to be, you know, bigger than what they might have built if they could simply just do 2 stories straight up and down. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There's a lot of nuance in the definition of a half story in the Denver zoning code and another potential barrier to explore. As Naomi mentioned, reuse of existing structures, we know is a complicated issue. Zoning gets in the way and often deters a lot of folks from reusing a structure like an existing garage, which we know is the, you know, sustainable thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And so we'd like to see what we can do to remove those barriers and hopefully allow folks to reuse what they can. And finally, in those suburban contexts, we know that we don't have the appropriate zone districts for folks to actually rezone into. And so we need to look closely at what that means to create those and what those form standards should be. That being the second portion of our charge here and our mission, and that's the creating contextually sensitive design standards for ADUs or regulations for them. We want to know what you guys think. What should an ADU look like in the suburban context versus the urban context? And so here's a quick map. It might be difficult to see. It's small, but if you don't know, the Denver zoning code works through contexts. And so downtown being a context that tells you what you can build there versus a suburban context, which is the darkest sort of teal here on the edges of town. And, ideally they have rules. They have different rules for every single building form out there, except for ADUs. Currently, the ADU standards are the same citywide. And so we've heard from the community that, that doesn't feel appropriate. An ADU in, let's say, Baker shouldn't look like an ADU in like Welshire. We want to take a look at what that means and what those differences are. So we're going to work closely with you guys.
And Josh,
figure
there
that
was just a quick clarification question from Renee. And Renee, she just said, do you mean looks like in terms of style or mass/height? Does that make sense, that question, or do you want to hear from Renee?
Yeah, go ahead. Actually, we're opening it up for questions now. Renee, if you want to come off.
And then there's been a robust chat. And so I just wanted to say a couple of things about what I'm seeing in the chat, and Abe might want to too. But Renee, do you want to say what your clarification question was?
Yeah, my question was just, are you talking about different size allowances, mass, height allowances? Or are you talking about style, like how it should look? Is it like with materials and?
No, yeah, we're looking at changing just the zoning code. So the zoning code currently does not dictate materials, style, color, things like that. So
yeah,
unless you are in a design review district or a landmark district, which does have its own design standards. Currently, this project is scoped with removing zoning barriers. So we're going to take the big chunks of, should the height be whatever, 3 feet taller, 3 feet shorter? We don't know. We need to explore. So yeah, it's definitely more allowance versus style, if you will.
Thanks for that clarification.
And I think at this point, we are going to turn in a second to a quick activity and getting a little input from you all. But I will say that there's been really helpful comments from all of you in terms of the kinds of interests and questions you have. Many of these are going to be relevant to the next questions on the poll, but I just want to let you know we're tracking all of these. I know that we've been writing furiously the topics you're raising, and we will save this chat, and everything that you're asking to hear more about and talk more about, every single one of those topics will be built into the upcoming meetings. So just know that this is really helpful, everything you're putting in the chat. I don't know, Abe, if you want to call out anything in particular, or if you just want to go to the exercise, which might help some of them.
Right, maybe just note that there are several folks have talked about lot sizes. So there are minimum lot size standards for detached accessory dwelling units that mean that even when you have the zoning that allows an ADU, you might not have a lot that's big enough to permit a detached ADU, and that has been a barrier. That's something that we want to explore as part of this project. So can we change those? Can they be lower? Where could they be lower? Where would that be appropriate? So I think that's all a really good part of the discussion. Then, there's some questions about making sure that they're affordable or making them more affordable, easier, less expensive to build. That's probably a little more challenging. On the one hand, whatever we can do to remove requirements that may be increasing cost without really getting us anything else, like making them fit in better, then we want to try to do that. So, but we also will be, moving forward, relying on folks like, Renee Martinez Stone and her work with the West Denver Renaissance Collaborative, where there's literally programs that are grant funded or funded from other sources that can help qualified homeowners build accessory dwelling units or help get them income restricted for lower income residents. are ways that we would look at doing that. And then short-term rentals. And that's something, you know, that's going to be a tough conversation. Josh talked a little bit about the allowances for them. It's kind of complicated, but I would be interested, like, feel free to email Josh about, you know, if you're really interested in that particular part of the discussion, short-term rentals, and we'll make sure that we have more discussion about it at our next committee meeting. We also think we might do a special focus group about that, just because it's such a specific topic, and, you know, there are really strong feelings about it from various perspectives. So, but definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then, Gosha's got a lot of great questions that we can get to as we move through the project.
Absolutely. And there's notes about particularly thinking about affordability and cost barriers in historically disenfranchised neighborhoods and other equity considerations. So all of these, thank you so much for putting them here. We will make sure they are addressed in upcoming meetings or focus groups. And I think with that, Abe, can you do a quick version of the poll?
Yeah, I'll try to do a really quick version.
Okay.
Let me, so if you left that window open that you have the poll in, you should be seeing the slide that says advisory committee input, and got some hearts. So some folks must have done that.
Can you post it again in the chat?
If you didn't, I'm going to post it in the chat again.
Thanks.
I can find the chat, I'll post it in there. Okay, here it is. All right, so I just posted the Menti link in the chat, so you can follow that. Let me send it to everyone.
And a reminder to those of you whose Mentimeter poll isn't working, just feel free to send us a response in the chat. You can do that privately and we'll make sure it gets recorded.
And Josh or Libby, if you want to follow that Mentimeter link and like literally type those things in that people are chatting, you can just be them. You can pretend you're them.
Sure. Yeah,
all right. So I'm going to go on. First question. So what do you consider the most important reasons to have ADUs? And just a couple thoughts, because we'll go through these really quickly.
And maybe if each of you just, pick one or two through crowdsourcing, we'll probably cover most of them. Pick your top. And maybe Josh and Abe, as you are seeing these pop up, maybe just call out the ones that have not been on your radar, because obviously a lot of these are what has spurred this project in the first place. But anything that's new, I think would be great to call out.
Yeah. Some of the things I've been thinking about in terms of just like being able to age in place, for sure. The home office consideration, although right now, you wouldn't actually need an accessory dwelling unit to have a home office necessarily in a separate structure if it wasn't a dwelling unit, if it was just your desk.
That came up in a different chat question, so that might be a comment to cover in a future meeting at some point.
Yeah, like when would you actually need to get something permitted as an accessory dwelling unit versus when is it just a rec room in your garage?
Yeah. And how to, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots about flexibility and affordability, just more space for, in-laws, retirement, expanded family members, etc. Good stuff.
Yeah, this is great. And again, the city team is going to be looking at these closely, and we will record all of these in the summaries. So we'll have a sense of the benefits from all of you.
Yeah.
And it will be part of the poll that the city gives to the public as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to click next in just a sec. So just finish typing whatever you may be working on. Having our single unit zones contribute to solving the housing crisis is something that we hear, and that's a concept in our adopted plans in Blueprint Denver. It doesn't mean that lower scale residential neighborhoods are necessarily where most of the growth would occur in the city. In fact, our plans say that most of the growth will occur in other areas, but that some of the growth will occur there. And that's important to give people options. So that's a great comment. All right, clicking next. What are potential concerns that you have about accessory dwelling units?
And again, maybe your top one or two.
Good. These are coming in slower because we've got a positive group. Yeah, the cookie cutter comment, we hear that a lot about like all new construction, it just looks the same. Our neighborhoods are, interesting and have a lot of great stuff going on. And some of you mentioned that that's one of the things that you really liked about your neighborhoods. And then when there's a lot of change and a lot of new things all at once and they all look the same, it's just a little discouraging.
Yeah, Rosemary mentions in the chat just impact on adjacent neighbors and change of neighborhood character.
So Donna mentioned also in the chat, so right now the rules for accessory dwelling units says that the owner has to live on site. And so she asked a really good question. What happens if the owner, well, really it would be like they move to another house, but continue to own that house. Technically the accessory dwelling unit isn't legal anymore. And then that is an issue, because if the owner was going to comply with the rules, technically they would have to not rent the ADU anymore.
Yeah, it's an important distinction that accessory dwelling use is tied to the owner of the property essentially. And so, yeah, they would have to hopefully sign with the new landlord, the new owner, to continue to remain in that ADU. If in fact they're selling the property to someone else. Yeah.
Okay, these are all great.
Yeah.
You're really thinking about it.
Good stuff. A little bit about
group
infrastructure. I see some questions about the cost of plumbing and sewage. Yeah. All very nuanced details that, add up quickly.
And when we get to the end of the meeting, we'll talk about what the next meeting is going to focus on. And my sense is that many of these things will factor in, and we'll have more discussion at that point. But this is going to be really great to sort of frame the conversation for that next meeting.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we did have in the public question and answer, at least one person was just asking about infrastructure and, what about, we all know there's not much water in this region, and how are we dealing with that as the city grows? And yeah, it's a real concern. Just in terms of basic infrastructure, our Department of Transportation and Infrastructure is always looking at capacity as things are growing and changing. And we also have a number of plans around that. But one key thing is that if we are going to growing where there already is infrastructure is relatively more sustainable. That doesn't mean that it isn't still a concern, but if we can put the newcomers into places where we don't have to build a whole bunch of new stuff and a whole bunch of new lawns with sprinkler systems and all of that, then that might be helpful. Okay, I'm going to move on. I think
And
to the
Abe,
last.
I'm wondering if this last slide we can do in a post, just in the interest of time. I think these were the two most important slides, right, that we wanted to get to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of good feedback here. Yeah.
So what we'll ask after the meeting is just what are some other considerations that we'll need to address? And if we have time at the end of the meeting, we can talk about that, or you're certainly welcome to email us. And I am going to actually move on to the next part of the presentation. And while that's happening, if you have any questions, feel free to just come off mic for a moment.
Yeah, and I do think that the point about other considerations, some people have put that in the chat, but feel free to put it in there while you're thinking about it, and we will come back to it. Okay, so Abe, are you walking us through this next part?
Yep.
Okay.
Be sharing my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
You see advisory committee input.
We see it.
Good.
All right. Actually, we're going to just move on from there to the process overview. We're getting close to the end here, so we just want to take care of some business, basically, and now just talk about how we plan to have this conversation with you and with the community. And so it's in a series of phases that you see on the slide here, building up to that ultimate zoning proposal and the adoption process. We're right at the beginning. This is actually the first meeting that we've had. It's not just staff. And we're kind of moving from just the kickoff of the project into the exploration of issues. And we'll move from there into where it really gets interesting is the evaluation of alternatives. And that's where we start talking about, like, what if the minimum lot sizes were different? What if the rules in the suburban neighborhood context zone districts were different? And here's what they resulted in. What if you could build an accessory dwelling unit in association with a duplex unit? That's something that Kosha brought up. That's something we can talk about and look at all those alternatives, then move on to the recommended strategy, which is really like which alternative really seemed to be the most workable, or which series of them. And from there, we go on to drafting the zoning that strategy recommended and into the adoption process. And as we move through those stages, you're along for the ride, and that should be a really fun conversation. We'll plan to have about 2 committee meetings in each one of those major phases. And we're hoping, actually, just because it'll be easier for all of us to remember, to do them generally on the first Thursday of every month, which means our next one would be on April 7th. And then you might just put reminders in your calendar for the remainder of the first Thursdays. Some of them, absolutely feel free to let us know if the time is just terrible for you. And if we hear from enough people, we'll figure something out. Also, we know, like, the week of the 4th of July, we'll probably have to do something different and things like that. But we do really want you weighing in at each major phase of the project and helping us with the ideas. And then just to note also that this certainly isn't the only community process that will have these meetings. It's an important part of it, though. Generally, we want to start with a conversation with you all, because you're going to get really knowledgeable about both ADUs and about where we're going with this project as we move through. But then once we've had a conversation with you in a phase, we want to take it to the wider community using some of the tools that you see on the slide, like surveys and open houses and things like that, and get a wider variety of feedback, and then circle back around, figure out how we should change direction, and have a conversation with you again. So I think really the last thing that we wanted to talk to you about is something that Ryan is going to lead, and it's just talking about, like, that committee charter document that we sent to all the committee members and kind of what all of our expectations are for having this conversation.
Great. And before I do that, in 5 minutes, we are going to open it up to public comment. And so what I did want to tell all of you who are who are attending is if you have questions that haven't been answered, or if there are things that you want to say, please put your virtual hand up in the Zoom and let us know if you'd like to speak during public comment. So with that said, a couple things just about your role as committee members and just expectations, roles, things like that. So first of all, I think one of the things we wanted to say is if you could let us know if you plan to miss a meeting. We definitely want all of your input. And so some of you have told us if you had to leave early today or we're coming late, but let us know because we want to make sure we get your and your constituents' input on the questions we're asking. Also, just make sure to read and review all of the materials ahead of time because there will be specific points that we want your input on. And for many of you who are part of organizations and neighborhoods and networks and have constituencies, we would love for you to sort of run things by folks and come to meetings with that kind of input. So that will be extremely helpful. I think the other thing is just that as you heard sort of what the progression of meetings is going to look like, we are first going to really want to hear from you all. What's important to you all? What are you seeing? What's on your radar? What concerns and interests do you have and why? And then towards the latter part of the process, we're going to be talking about solutions based on what we've heard in these first meetings. So that's going to be really great to hear from you all. I think in terms of other roles, the city staff here, they're going to be your main points of contact. Josh is the project manager. If you have any questions, please reach out between meetings. If you have process ideas following tonight's meeting or other meetings, feel free to send those to me. And we will definitely try to do what we can. We are trying to keep these meetings as accessible and open as possible. We really did want to have small discussion groups, but that makes it hard for members of the public to join. So that's a balance that we're trying to strike. Let us know if you have thoughts about that. And I think one thing I just wanted to ask is if any of you have things that would help you in the process to be able to contribute your ideas more effectively or the input of your constituents. So I see a couple of questions in the chat and comments. Ozzy said in future meetings there be a way for panelists to share visual examples, which is a great point. And yes, it looks like there is a couple of people agreeing with that. Yeah, you all will absolutely have the ability to share your screens. And so it'd be great if ahead of meetings, if any of you have visual examples you'd like to share, to let us know. And we'll just make sure at some point in the meeting that we open it up and turn to you and you can be ready to do that. I know the staff is also planning to do a lot of that too. And Abe just mentioned that. Is there anything else? Does anyone else want to put anything in the chat or just speak up at this point about other things that you might suggest for the process or that would make it easier for you?
Besides less confusing surveys.
I've made a note of those of you who are having trouble and we'll follow up to make sure that you can do the surveys. Okay. That's great. I think unless anyone else has, Josh, Abe, you want to say anything more process-wise, I think we can go to public comment if anyone from the public does want. Oh, let's see. And I think we actually we have one person right now raising their hand in public comment. So I think now is a chance actually, before we go to public comment, is there anything that any of you want to share just about what you're seeing or hearing or things that are really important to you to see in future meetings that you maybe didn't see in that schedule? Nope. That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. Okay. All righty. Well, I think then we can go to public comment and it looks like we may not have too many, which is totally fine. Elizabeth, I'm going to go to you to open it up to the first question and feel free to identify yourself with your question.
Leslie, you're on the line.
Leslie, do you want to go ahead? I think you're unmuted. No.
Now?
Yeah.
Oh, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wondered, historically, what were the most successful ADUs in the ones that we have? Family members, rentals, how successful, what category of arrangements seem to work out better so that people have a better chance of succeeding and troubleshooting, what kind of arrangements do they need to make with family members, with renters, stuff like that, how that may be a complicated question. The other thing is, are Airbnbs going to be allowed? I know that's a controversial thing in neighborhoods. Does that count as a rental? And does the city have some hopeful goals for affordable housing? What percent of these ADUs will really solve that problem? 60,000 homes is not a realistic goal, obviously, but I just wondered if that would be, if what they expect to get out of this program, which I think is a great idea, it's creative. So several questions like that. Airbnbs.
Yep.
I
I had 3 questions. Successful models, Airbnbs, hopeful goals for affordable housing.
Yeah, well, thanks. You got it?
Thanks, Leslie. Josh.
Yeah, let's start with, oops, sorry, you accidentally muted Ryan, but it's okay. Let's start with the Airbnbs. Currently, Airbnbs are allowed. They're allowed on anyone's property if it is your permanent residence. So you can rent out a bedroom in your house right now if you wanted to. You can rent out your whole entire house if you're away for the weekend. And because an ADU is an extension of your own home, you are technically currently allowed to rent out the ADU as an Airbnb as well. That is something that, Aid mentioned, we will look at in this project to see what that means for the city and if that's the right thing moving forward. We're not sure. It's a tricky question because, a lot of folks want that flexibility in their property. A lot of property owners say that, potentially an ADU might not get built if they're not allowed to do that when needed. And so a lot of different discussions to be had around there.
Yeah, we hear so much about how, if they're all short-term rentals, how can they possibly contribute to, our housing objectives, which was part of your other question. And yeah, it's complicated because on the one hand, they wouldn't if they were just always on Airbnb and not rented to an actual resident of Denver. But on the other hand, we hear so much that people finance the construction of new accessory dwelling units through short-term rentals, and then eventually, it's a lot of work to run a short-term rental, and you give up and get a long-term tenant, and then it is contributing to housing. So it's complicated. We have lots of hopeful goals for housing as a city, of course. And I think you're right, Leslie. Well, you at least indicated that it's like ADUs are probably, certainly are not alone going to solve the housing crisis. It's one little piece of the puzzle, and that is just creating more housing in places that oftentimes are like great places for people to live. Like the infrastructure is already there. All the things that you guys talked about loving in your neighborhoods in terms of walking to great commercial and having really established neighbors, it's all there already. And so I think they can help us meet our housing goals. There are a lot of other things we're going to need to do. We're going to need to do it all.
Yeah, to sort of try to answer your first question, I think defining success for us as the city is actually creating those additional housing units, regardless of how they may appear today or tomorrow. This could be a short-term rental now this month, but in 10 years from now, a new homeowner might come in and that might be an affordable rental. And so I think, yeah, it's hard to answer today, but as far as the priority, success is creating more of those units and actually opening up opportunities for housing now or in the future.
For
Thanks,
Leslie, the last part of his question might actually be best answered by one of our committee members. If, like we have committee members who design ADUs, and what's been most successful?
In terms of the affordable housing question, or in terms of what defines success?
Just the first question about like what I'd sort of read it as like, what are some of the what has made ADUs in the past successful in various ways, like they're really workable for families or for people who are hoping to age in place on their properties.
I think that's also a great question for if one or two committee members have something brief. I just want to also note that I see Darcy's hand up. There were a couple of quick questions in the chat, and there's another attendee with her hand up. So does anyone want to speak to that, like in 30 seconds or less, to Abe's question?
I can speak to that.
Please.
So I can just give quick statistics of the 11 ADUs that we have put into process and helped owners. 10 of those units in West Denver are to house extended family. 8 of them, that extended family is currently living in the primary home. So someone lost a job or got priced out of the market. So with the exception of one homeowner who intends in the immediate time frame to rent it out, we don't allow short-term rentals. The majority are going towards family that's doubled up and family that needs wants to stay in the neighborhood.
Thanks, Renee. And also there was a note from Sarah that she's seen many of her ADU clients initially use ADUs as a short-term rental to help pay down the mortgage and then switch to a longer-term rental, in terms of, I think, going to that question about what does success look like with ADUs. Great. Anyone else with just a quick example, and then we'll go to the raised hands.
And I've seen a client build an ADU and move into the ADU so that he could rent out his main house, which I thought was pretty neat because, he's a small family and he was able to make his main house available for a big family. Great.
So thanks, everyone. And I think we're going to get more into this in future meetings too. Like what does success really look like for all of you? What have you seen? What I'd love to do is, Darcy, you've had your hand up for a little bit here. Can we go to you? And then we're going to go to someone in the audience, Bridget Larkin. Go ahead, Darcy. I think you're on mute. Oh, Darcy, you're on mute, but I see you're talking.
Sorry about that. I have one of the clients that I had wanted to build the ADU, but use her garage for a art studio, which is a commercial space, and she would have warehouses. She'd teach class. And so that kind of goes into home office. It also goes into what else you can do on the ADU. So if she rents out the bottom and she wants to be able to have her either home office or art studio or another commercial business there. So are we going to cover that in this?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, there's certain things that you can do that are defined under home office. So I think something like an art studio is allowed, but as soon as you begin to sort of sell things out of that studio, or maybe like a class that actually kicks it into more of a commercial use, which that, unfortunately involves a rezoning into a district that allows a commercial use. So something like a mixed use district, which, say she wanted to run like a sneaker shop out of the garage, that would be a commercial enterprise where you're selling retail merchandise and or classes. It's tricky. I mean, I don't know if we could see that was somehow a barrier to creating an ADU potentially would fit under our scope, but currently in single unit districts where commercial uses are not allowed, I don't think we are taking on that bit of rezoning to a mixed use district through the scope of this project.
Well, they used to have in the neighborhoods beauty salons, hairdressers, the whole 9 yards in residential neighborhoods. So I think there are some zoning that you can have in the residential neighborhoods, but there again.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certain limitations. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's limits to it, but I think that's something that we can definitely add to our, our existing memo for our internal departments to have those conversations about what are appropriate uses in residential districts and to create those, inclusive, equitable neighborhoods that we want.
Yep. So I do want to go to the question in the audience, and also I want to point out that a couple of people, including a member of the audience, and I think Renee too, raised the issue of how do we monitor and define equity? How is that going to be done in this process to see if the results actually do promote equity? So I think that is certainly one of is a topic that there's some interest in discussing. So I think we are going to duly note that and make sure it's discussed in an upcoming meeting. And have the city really give some extra thought to that beforehand. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that'll be a challenging but necessary part of the conversation. And we will have a hard time taking that on fully just by changing the zoning code and its setbacks and its height limits and things like that, because a lot of that conversation probably will have to go into what the city is funding, or what resources might be available to help people build ADUs, like the kinds of projects that Renee undertakes.
Yeah. Okay. So I see Bridget Larkin has been very patient and has her hand up. And Elizabeth, can we unmute her so she can go ahead?
Yep, Bridget, you can unmute.
Bridget, we are not hearing you.
Still muted, it looks like. There she is.
There she is.
Okay, so I have been living in Montbello for the past 25 years. And so I became interested in the ADU probably about about a year ago. And so I had noticed my neighbor, well, actually two of my neighbors have an ADU house in their backyard. So I had inquired about, what's the steps to get that, because I would like to have one. And they told me that they just built the ADU and they didn't do anything else. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, more than likely it's illegal. So what's the state? What's going to happen when people build ADUs in their backyard without pulling a permit?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
It creates a difficult situation. Yeah.
That's
probably is illegal if it's in Montbello, actually. Sorry, Judge, go ahead.
Yeah, that's the exact situation we would like to avoid, because, we as the city have not inspected that property potentially to make sure that it is safe and fully up to code and that it's, not a hazard for the folks that are living in there. And so in order to have an ADU in Montbello, you would have to rezone your property, which is 6 to 9 months, then get a permit, go through the entire inspection process. And as I think it was with Darcy mentioned earlier, it could take up to 18 months before you actually have a habitable structure in your backyard. And so that's something we want to look at very closely here is, how big of a barrier is that, just the process, right? We want to see where we can hopefully streamline some of these things and make it more accessible, create a little bit more equity in the sense that we know folks are doing this today because they need to, right? Folks are looking for housing solutions and having to take it upon themselves to create them. And so we absolutely want to remove the barriers that are currently in the way of creating good and legal outcomes without incurring an excessive expense or making it impossible to do so.
Yeah. And thank you for pointing that out, because that's probably, that's part of the backstory here. I am noting the time, it's 6:29, and we do want to let everyone go, but we first want to, I think, just thank everyone and let you know what to expect next. And just a reminder about what we're going to do with all the input that we got today, which was actually pretty substantial, including in the chat. Josh, do you want to pull up that slide about the next meeting? Perfect.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so thanks. This is great. This is a lot of feedback, and I think I'm happy to stay on the Zoom call as well beyond 6:30 if there's any more questions from the public or anything like that. But before we adjourn, I'd like to just note that meeting 2 is we're looking at coming up in a month. So hope to see you all there and continue some of these discussions. But meeting 2 is exploring just those issues. So we're going to take everything that we've heard from today. We're also going to send out a couple of more online polls. We're going to hopefully guide everyone to the website through the email, and I'll be in touch with the committee specifically, but getting more feedback on some of those issues. We want you to really, just in the meantime, start to think about some of those barriers that are out there, or just other things that could potentially be a barrier, a little bit more about those general concerns, and really specifically think about the different contexts and how they apply to different neighborhoods throughout Denver. So really try to consider, what type of ADU would be appropriate in your neighborhood. Should it be closer to the fence, further away, taller, shorter, who knows? But really just start to think about that as you are moving through your neighborhood, and as you just happen to see some of these potentially existing ADUs, or legal or not.
All right, so that's a preview of coming attractions. Thank you so much to all of you for being here. Thanks to all of you who listened in. Thanks for everyone's patience. We will strive to have more discussion time than speaking time at future meetings, but thanks for bearing with us tonight to get everyone up to speed. And feel free to email us with any suggestions in between meetings, and we'll listen. We'll send materials out for the next meeting. Anyone who wants to stay on with specific questions for the city staff, please feel free to do so. And otherwise, good night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.